Okay, hello and welcome to our discussion. I am Rick from the Class Consciousness Project, and we're here today to talk about the trade union capitulation to imperialism by announcing their support to the NATO proxy war in Ukraine with the composite motion C21 by GMB and ASLEF. Here today for this discussion, I have Chris Hawes of the Class Consciousness Project and our comrade Claire from the CPGB-ML. How are you doing, guys? You all right?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, we're all right, Rick.
Yeah. Right. I want to dive straight in because first and foremost, you went to the fringe meeting that was on in Liverpool by the Ukraine Solidarity campaign. How did you feel about that being held in Liverpool with the rest of the other sort of Ukraine washing that has happened with you've had the Ukraine Gay Pride held here. You've had the Ukraine Eurovision moves here. How do you feel about how they're trying to use Liverpool to legitimise through the left-wing side?
Well, I think it's cynical at best. And I have previously written about how we shouldn't have held Eurovision in the first place, not just for the pro-imperialist reasons, but the fact that, like most things that come to our city, never benefit the ordinary people, not even the people who work at these events. And I actually went round with leaflets protesting it. It didn't get much feedback, but I've been against that for a while. And it is, like I said, it's cynical at best that our city is being used as sort of like a proxy for a proxy.
Yeah. Why do you think it is using Liverpool though, Chris?
Well, we're twinned with Odessa, which a lot of people don't realise. That twinning happened during the time when Odessa was part of the Soviet Union. It didn't just happen like last week. And we've got this sort of celebrity socialist fake rebellious image where we don't let anyone tell us what to do. So it's quite easy to manipulate people in Liverpool to stand up to a bully like Putin instead of standing up to a bully like Joe Biden. It's easy to it's just very easy to manipulate Liverpool people, I think. Not all of us, but it probably happens in other cities too. But all you need to do in Liverpool is say, he wrote for the Sun. You can't listen to him. You know, he shook Thatcher's hand. You can't listen to him. And I don't mean to mock the people of Liverpool, because I'm the Scouser myself. And you could say this about anyone in the country. A lot of people would rather see a symbol than look into actual issues that are going on.
So it's like catchphrases as well.
Yeah.
Try and
everyone
tabloid politics.
Yeah. Nobody wants to discuss things, but everyone wants to say Slava Ukraini. It's dead easy. It takes less than a second to say that. And we live in such a busy society that discussion is limited to catchphrases. You only need to go on Twitter to see that.
Claire, as you've seen the poster for the fringe event, said, "Why must we side with Ukraine?" So what did you feel you were going to achieve when yourself and other comrades went down there?
The main achievement was a voice against that, a counter voice. So in the party, we'd had an article from Steve Sweeney outlining the AWL, their origins, their connections with the unions, or should we say, basically, I've got to say the US puppet unions at the moment in the Ukraine. So it was like that a voice has to be heard against it. And as Chris says, there is just so much people are complicit, or they're not engaging with it. And it was like a bandwagon had come to town, and you know, there had to be a voice against that. Both talking about the outrage, really, of British unions not siding with the Ukraine in the blind fashion that they've done it, but also, again, this complete close down on discussion. It's like it's just all a done deal. So I think that needed to have the light shone on it. And so the aim for me was to distribute the leaflets that challenged that, and the leaflets did work, which was pleasing. You know, the meeting went ahead, but it really ruffled feathers and brought out some anger, which I think is the start anyway. It's fruitful. We must have been saying something they didn't like.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What was the atmosphere like, Chris, in the actual event as you went into the building?
It was very tense. It started. There was a bit of, I wouldn't say argy-bargy, but I could tell when I turned up that people weren't that happy about Clare's leaflets. And she told me she'd already been barred from entering. So I went in with her and a couple of erstwhile comrades from the WPB all went in. Security tried to stop us again. And I just said, I'm a member of Unite, I'm entitled to go in. And there was, it was a bit funny actually. He thought we were trying to get into the Irish meeting. There was a meeting of like the Irish community. But I just said, no, we're going to the thing about you. He said there's two TUC things on. I said, we're going to the Ukraine one. And we just all walked in. But things got a bit more tense from there, because I think everyone knew who we were or what our stance was. And one thing I noticed, that one of the organisers of the event kept coming over to me and Claire and asking for another leaflet. Like she was just trying to surreptitiously take them off her. I don't know what that would have achieved, but she obviously wasn't reading them.
Trying to run your leaflets down before handing them out to other people.
Yeah. And I didn't really, well, none of us really said anything during the first half of the meeting. But it was, because we know the score, they was saying all the kind of things you usually hear from pro-Ukrainians. You know, Putin's a fascist, a bully. We need to stand up with other workers, which we should, but that, to me, didn't seem like what the agenda of the meeting was really about. And that was pretty much what I can tell you about the first half, because it ended quite dramatically with a fire alarm being set off. Then we all were rushed outside.
Can I just interrupt you there, Chris?
Yeah.
To follow the narrative of it. Chris is absolutely right. They didn't want us to go in. We sneaked in. I think they'd already decided on the fire alarm thing, so that they knew that they'd box that off anyway. I've never been to a meeting like this before, but I've heard since that this is a tactic that can be used. I had no idea of that at the time. I felt that the atmosphere was unpleasant. It's difficult to not see it that way when everything they're saying you believe is a lie and you're totally against. So it's it's difficult to be open. But even with that, none of it felt genuine. It felt stage managed. It's a narrative you'd find on the BBC. So there was no, and you think this is supposed to be, you know, this is the Labour Party, this is the unions, and you're thinking, well, are we not going to look at anything? Are we not going to critique anything? But of course, they're in their true colours. They're there to support the establishment, and everything they said did that. Their clip of somebody speaking to us directly from Ukraine, none of it I believed. The problem for the people in Ukraine is that they're not going to get a voice, because you just expect everyone's a stooge and singing from the same hymn sheet. So that was quite tricky. The room was divided between what I would regard as old-style union men who'd been around a long time, and they did not want to take a leaflet. They were not interested on going in. A bunch of people with deep tans, like they look like people I'd expect to be in higher management or advertising company types, and they probably were. And kind of shady, besuited men as well. So it was an odd atmosphere that felt rehearsed, a kind of bandwagon that they just trot out, and that's how they behaved. That's how they behaved.
And it was very managed. It was stage managed.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that goes fitting in with the people that are organising the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign, Paul Mason and Chris Ford. And when you say about the types of people that were there, you even had the US-funded free trade unions. You had the head of the Youth Council of the Federation of Trade Unions of Ukraine, who are all, if you look through Steve Sweeney's article, he speaks about this in depth, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Can I just admit, I haven't read that article.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to read that, that's on the CPGB-ML website. Very good, very interesting read.
Can I just pop something in there before I forget? Standing outside before the event began, there was somebody else from another party, a few Workers' Party members, and somebody from an anti-fascist group. But the chap from the Communist Party, not ours, and to be fair, I can't remember the organisation he's with, but he was very complimentary about our party's feed, about our webpage, and he said that was the only place he could go to for background and the truth, the truth on the situation. So I held that with me all the way through, thinking it's going to be that's going to be worthwhile. It's when people are looking for the message, when people are looking for the truth, when people are looking for just a little bit of clarity, where are they going to go? And so I was really proud of that. And the leaflet was merely a condensed version of Steve's article and then what had been put on our webpage. So I felt strengthened by the fact I had positive, valuable literature. That just meant everything, because the rest of it was just theatre. It felt like that. But this didn't. This felt like, well, do you want to just consider these facts? Do you want to just consider who's running these unions? Do you want to just consider this AWL organisation? And I was thinking, this is a bit, I knew it would be contentious, because I'm thinking Steve's article pulls no punches. The AWL are not what they purport to be. I mean, my God, if the Labour Party aren't what they purport to be, what the heck are the AWL? So it was like, we're going to unveil that for you. And I felt really proud of that. That's what sustained it, I think, despite all the nonsense that went on. Thanks.
Like a dagger of truth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic. What I would like to go further into, Chris, you said that they set off the fire alarm while you were in the meeting, like going into the second half. What happened there?
Well, just as the first round of speeches were coming to an end, the fire alarm went off. At first, I didn't move because I thought it was a drill. I couldn't smell a fire. I couldn't see any smoke. But eventually we all left, followed by the security who had tried to stop us going in the first place. And when we got outside, I can't remember his name now, but he was another one of the organisers of the meeting. Made a big announcement saying this is a typical Stalinist tactic to disrupt our meetings. And then out of a drain pipe somewhere, John McDonnell appeared and gave a big speech in the rain about, how we should be supporting Ukraine and not listening to lies, etc. But it was just so theatrical. I would have laughed. Well, I did laugh a bit, but I was really angry because they were, when they said Stalinists, I presume they were referring to us. But one of them had set that fire alarm off because all of the people who had gone there with an opposing point of view were in the building, were in the room when the fire alarm went off.
We've got a quote from another comrade that was there, Alexandros, and he said that he believed John McDonnell did not want to be questioned by any of the opposing views, the dissenting views from the narrative in the room. That's why it was set off, and that's why he was allowed to do his speech in the rain. So he was allowed to sing in the rain outside of the meeting.
But sorry, Claire.
I was just going to say that's where the tension was coming from. They did not want to be questioned, and they knew what would be brought up, and they can't sustain that because it's because of what we know about what's going on in Ukraine. So it can't bear the light on it at all.
But the ironic thing was that John McDonnell said we want an open discussion in his little speech or words to that effect.
Of course he did.
And then he just disappeared back down the drain pipe. I literally didn't see where he went or came from. It must have been through a drain pipe.
John McDonnell's drain pipe, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Like, do you remember their tombs of the X-Files? But you can just like go into drain pipes and then appear somewhere else and go under a crack in the door. That's what John McDonnell is. He's tombs.
It's a strange event, isn't it, when trade unions are supposed to be supporting class politics, are supposed to be strong supporters of the workers, aren't they? And we know ourselves that this war didn't start last year. It began with the coup in 2014, which was a real attack. It was a real class attack, which people don't really seem to get into, because the Donbass is a working class industrial area, which is still quite pro-Soviet, which is one of the reasons why it was used for this, wasn't it? So how do people reconcile the support of the Kiev regime, also alongside the lack of democracy in Kiev now, with any dissenting groups, mainly leftist? They're critical of the regime. They are outlawed and even sent to jail. How do people reconcile this in the meeting, Claire?
Oh, they reconcile it by not looking at it and not talking about it. Hence the anger towards this article by Steve, because it outlines exactly that these unions have been taken over directly. CIA is involved in the Ukraine. You've only got to look at those horrifying images of what happened to the real union members in the burning building. That's, you've only to look at that to say, the reality of what's going on in Ukraine has been US domination and infiltration, and it's documented. So how any group here would support that is, well, it just exposes who they are and who their paymasters are. And I can't remember your original question now. I think the question is, how do working people reconcile that? We know why the people in that room don't reconcile it. They're either paid not to, or they're completely deluded. They're dyed-in-the-wool and anti-USSR, and they've got their own reasons for that. But they're a tiny minority. But they're a tiny minority who are fully supported and fully backed by the USA. So therefore, they can afford that room, and they can afford the video links, and they can afford the nonsense that surrounds it. But working people are kept away from that, and that's the part for groups and parties such as our own to get that voice out, because it's not going to come out any other way.
I completely agree with Claire when she said that they aren't reconciling it; they're just ignoring it. They're not. Well, we know. I'm not talking about everyone who's going to listen to this, but everyone should know that people who get to the top of the TUC or any union haven't done it by representing workers well. They've done it because they've compromised and collaborated. That's a really big cup of tea. Sorry.
Whilst I was slurping on it, I was just going to say that is so true, Chris. That it's a union and it represents workers all in name. I think workers know that. It's just at the moment they don't have any choice, and they fall back, and I think, on their individual lives and their individual needs, and keep their head down and think this will change. It's not great at the moment, but it will get better.
Yeah, but that's what the ruling class always wants.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And that was why trade unions were started in the first place.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking unionism, but it's gone very far away from the likes of the Saltpuddle martyrs and people like that who were arrested for being in unions and trying to make things better for workers. But it's just become another tool of the establishment.
And we know that every dissenting voice, it's corralled towards supporting the Labour Party, as if the Labour Party were a genuine, opposition on behalf of workers. And we know that to be fallacious. And in fact, it's just the Tory B team. It's the establishment's B team, isn't it? So knowing all that, it's so important that we challenge that and offer the truth for when people are ready to look for it. Yeah. Yeah,
we have to. It's I consider it a moral duty to do that.
Absolutely.
If you know the truth when everyone else is lying, you can't just keep it to yourself.
No.
The same way, if you had like 10 tins of beans and all your neighbours had nothing, you can't just keep all them tins of beans to yourself, unless you were a capitalist.
Yeah, that's a good analogy for the ruling class. That you change the tins of beans to all our money earned from the labour power, and that's what they hoard away, don't they? One of the points I'd like to make as well is the once great National Union of Mine Workers. They've been a part and agreed to it. Obviously, very small in number now, but once upon a time, where the strikes of the 80s with Scargill, the miners in the Donbass supported the NUM, didn't they? They sent out care packages and supported them in every way they could. And now the NUM, by supporting this motion, by backing the Kiev regime, have just totally spat all over them, haven't they? Spat all over their support many years ago. What's your opinion on that, Claire?
Oh, well, apart from it being a travesty, it's part of it's not a new world. It's part of the stage that we're at the moment, where they trade on remnants of history, and the establishment. Part of your point about coming to Liverpool, it trades on that memory and that legacy, whilst doing the exact opposite. They won't. I don't believe they'll be able to do it for very much longer, or you can't continue down that road. Not with economic conditions deteriorating, because people they won't care about that anymore. It's going to become more raw than that. But at the moment, they're still able to do that. They're still able to commodify for their own interests moments in history where the establishment were truly challenged. And I think that was true in the 80s. There was a moment where, push a bit further, other unions, had they not abandoned the NUM, if they joined with the NUM, there could have something interesting could have happened. So you neutralize it though, don't you? You've destroyed the industry, but you can still call on that kind of industrial past of Britain for your own ends. And that's what it felt like. I felt like I was in a BBC canteen there that night, with a lot of people, advertising types from Shoreditch thrown in, a few guys in ominously large and expensive looking cars. It was not Liverpool. It was also sad that it was in the kind of, well, I say sad, but it's also telling, isn't it? All of the things that you cling to as a liberal, I suppose, is the Quaker Meeting House. The Quakers, they're all about, equality and fairness and simplicity. And it was in the Quaker Meeting House where they were there with their Nazi symbols and their inhumane, attitudes towards those in the Soviet Union and their lies. So it's good in a way, isn't it? It's like all of those all of those comforts that you might have had have got to be taken away. You've got to see the real picture. Does that make any sense? So it's like anything that you think you might want to cling to, that this is genuine, this is about fairness, this is a level playing field. Somehow, all of those myths that we've been educated into by the establishment through liberal education or whatever, you're going to see the truth, the machine behind it, the violence behind it, that other people have been suffering for centuries, but we've been largely cushioned from, and now you're going to see it. And so that's what it felt like.
So that was brilliant, Claire. But one thing I'd like to come back to, as you entered into this late stage capitalism, capitalism essentially commodifies everything, like you say. And it's for this, it seems to have commodified Liverpool, go back to the original point, where the sort of socialism, the quasi-socialism of Liverpool is being commodified to use to make Ukraine war seem legitimate, the NATO proxy war seem legitimate by saying that the socialist city of Liverpool supports. We had the Ukraine Eurovision, we had the Ukraine Pride, and now we're holding the TUC meeting, the fringe meeting that supports Ukraine with the Ukraine Solidarity campaign. And how many Liverpudlians were there? How many local Liverpudlians were there? How many actual workers turn up to these sort of things? And that's another one, is are workers starting to realise, because you can just take a little glance through the internet and find out what's going on. You can pick apart the BBC articles, the CNN articles, the legacy media. You could just look at some of the things they say. Well, they were starting off saying Putin's going to die next week and the Ukraine war will be finished in a day and a half and we can sit down and have our toast. And all that's just come out nonsense, hasn't it? So how do we move on from here now? What do we do to try and change the attitudes? Are they changing by themselves, and can we push that, or does it need something more, Chris?
Well, I've heard just from the people I talk to regularly, not comrades, but people on the bus, fellas in the pub, people who I work with, they're starting to agree more with what we've said from the start. Because you can lie, the media can lie, but eventually people get fed up with it, because nobody's that stupid to believe a lie for 20 years. When did you stop believing in Father Christmas? When you were like 18, 19? Not when you were 20.
No, I think you can go back to the Iraq war as well, can't you? At the time, obviously, it had a great
it had like a
movement.
Yeah, it did. But that was a minority movement, and there were a lot of people saying, I want my kid to sign up and go and batter Saddam.
And now you see on the BBC, you see shows about how the war was wrong, and how you can see it on normal TV, on legacy media now, and they will criticise. Well, they did. It seems to have slowed down again with this war, but they did start to criticise George Bush and Tony Blair, because it became almost a populist thing to say that the Iraq war was an unjust war. But we all knew that from the very start. We all knew that from the very start, just like Afghanistan, just like what they did.
Ricky, what they'll allow you to do is exactly that, because you're not joining the dots. You're not seeing the class interests. You're not getting people. It's like it's an event. It's a war, and they'll talk about the war as if it's a battle between individuals. They'll talk about Putin. I couldn't be less interested in who's leading which country. It's about interests. It's about what's really going on and the real cause of the war. And I feel as if they have like a playground of ideas that they'll allow you to look at. The internet is controlled, obviously, by shadow banning, the things that you don't see, and you don't know that you don't see them. But also, there's something there for everyone, isn't there? So there's something that for the conspiracy theorists, there's even the truth out there. But it's like, that's not a united workers movement. That's not a strike at political action. And as soon as it becomes that way, then they'll deploy different tactics. So at the moment, we're not quite there. So what we just get are the same old divide and rule, look over here, crazy TV programming, you know, the usual, that they're still using those strategies. They won't always. They'll use might, and that will come eventually. But your question was about, can we do more?
Yeah.
Yes, because people may well become disgruntled, but we don't have a mass working class movement. So we have to, I think, guard against it shifting to the right. Fascism will always be in the toolbox of the establishment that they can pull out to absorb, to channel anger, but to channel it away from themselves. And we've got to make sure that that anger and that feeling of injustice and that understanding of the class system of capitalism is directed to the right place.
Mm-hmm.
So the message has to get out. And so, yeah, it's like, you know, information, listening to Chris there, you know, not everyone's going to get it at the same time, but that doesn't mean there isn't an appetite. And that doesn't, you know, because workers will just be like, it's all shite. There's that idea of, I don't want to get involved. They're all lying to me. They know the Labour Party's, you know, bogus. They don't vote. But that's not enough. That's just one stage of disenfranchisement. That's just one stage of disaffection. It's got to be positive. There has to be a positive, inspirational vision of the future, which is perfectly achievable in time. And it's the people who think, well, I'll tell you what it's going to look like, who've got to get that message out there. And I think that's where we're at the moment.
And
that's the interesting points in that, where you're seeing a lot of anti-NATO positions coming from the more, I don't like using this term, but for ease, the conspiracy theorists, the sort of right-wing-esque, who are coming in with an anti-NATO, anti-war point. But the message is wrong, because they're against the war, but in actual fact, they are quite far right. So it dilutes, and that's one thing we should never do, is dilute the message. We should always be trying to push a class awareness on the workers. If groups come in with a similar ideal to us on one position, that's fine. But if they are going to chase the workers down a rat hole, then it's counterproductive, isn't it? And it's something we've got to guard against. Chris?
Yeah, you're right about that. I was just going to add to what Claire said, and also what you said. When I was discussing the official invasion of the Ukraine, or whatever they call it in the media, I was surprised by people who I considered to be socialists, I would usually have good chats with, completely turned against me. And people who were not really engaged in politics said, it sounds like you've got a point there. I thought there was something a bit, they'd always say, I'm not interested in politics, I don't vote, but I've read the paper, and that seems a bit dodgy, what's going on. And they were people I could engage with more, people who were not interested in politics, but could see, because they're not thick.
I think that's a good point. Do you not think that there's an element of tribalism that, I mean, I come from a family of, you know, historically Labour voters, but also, you know, and it's quite hard to go against that. So if you're talking to people who you think you should be on the left, they'll go with their own party line. It's too uncomfortable to say, well, the party I support or the groups I support, I've just got this knee-jerk reaction to key words like, you know, I don't know, dictatorship and Putin, all of which was laid down during the 90s selectively, like it's an outlaw state and it's all about the big oligarchs, whilst, you know, obviously the US were just draining its resources, carte blanche.
In America, they're called entrepreneurs.
Well, exactly. But with people who don't have that political tribalism and allegiance, it's often easier, isn't it, to get in there and say, let's look at this discreetly. I mean, I think that, you know, the danger, though, you're mentioning, I think, Ricky, is Americans who don't want to get in the war because they want to look after America. And I don't know whether that's just competing kind of imperialist powers, or whether there's hope there, because they've got this pipe dream of what America could be, and it's like, which Trump represents. We don't get involved in as many wars. We don't go in there and save the world. But it's still not looking. It's still not looking at class.
No,
It'll look at other issues. It'll look at, shall we, free trade, no free trade, protectionism, whatever. But it's not really looking at the fundamental economic relations in that society, because that's where it's real, and that's where they won't let you look.
When you go into the point about you're saying about the tribalism within the politically minded, it goes back to the old adage of it's easier to fool someone than to convince them they're being fooled, doesn't it? People get so, like you say, tribal. So you've got to convince people that it's not a football team. You don't have to support them forever.
Yeah.
People say they'll vote Labour because they've always voted Labour, when in actual fact it's not the correct do if you're a working class person.
Claire was talking about the suits who were at the meeting.
Yes.
They all seemed to disappear after the fire alarm. I didn't notice them there in the second half. And the other thing that disappeared in the second half was the Ukrainian flag that they had draped over the projector. And one half of it had what seemed to be a black sun logo, which we were later told was the emblem of the Ukrainian Miners' Union. But they got rid of that as soon as it was pointed out. So I can only surmise about what that was all about, because it could genuinely be a Ukrainian mine logo, but it did look very much like the Nazi black sun symbol, which you see a lot in Greece and East Europe.
Was like you say about these symbols, even if that one wasn't, because I was told that was a minor symbol too, but it does look like the symbols that you are seeing on Ukrainian soldiers. You're even seeing it at the very start of the war, when Azov Battalion were being interviewed on the media. You were seeing the logos, the black sun. You had the nationalist Ukrainian positions, and it was almost like it was just ignored. Pretend it's not there. Pretend that these symbols don't mean what they mean. It's like there is a resurgence of the Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera, which happened around 2015, 2016, didn't it? When they created him as a national hero. But this is all ignored. This is all just glazed over, as you mentioned before, Claire.
We've got to, I mean, it might sound glib, and I absolutely don't mean to be at all. I genuinely believe this, that watching the mainstream media, sporting events, you can't move for virtue signaling. You can't move for their agenda. It was trans rights, it's Black Lives Matter, it's Ukraine, it's everywhere. The colours, the logos, the narratives. And I think it's reassuring. It's reassuring because they realize they need to do that. So it's distressing, it's unpleasant, it's stultifying, and we've all got to realize that it's a class war. It's just that the workers don't realize it. But as we said, the rulers know it, the establishment knows it, and so they're constantly vigilant about what they're putting out there. And so what I'll say for we there, Chris, because I think you said something similar. When you go into an event like that, any vestiges of what unionism used to be, I mean, it's just derelict. I mean, you go there and it may as well have been the BBC putting it on. So it's just an establishment event to what? Create a photo opportunity, corral the last vestiges of people who might challenge it. You know, it's just, but it's so dead. It's completely and utterly corrupt and dead, and it will not offer anything to young people or workers who are onto it and aware, but just haven't joined all the dots together. That's my concern. That it's like it's like one thing being turned off, but it's another thing tuning into the right message and doing something new. And that's where we've got to come in.
Yeah.
There has to be leadership, because without leadership, you'll just get British workers fragmented, angry,
And manipulated.
Someone will lead them. I mean, I know it can, you know, at the moment, but we're not quite there yet. But who knows? Who knows? You know?
Just to add to what you were saying, you know, about flags, the vestiges of what used to be. That is the ultimate tool of the capitalist. It's advertisement.
Yes.
Even I don't particularly like McDonald's. I don't even like the food, but they've been successful because everybody knows who they are. The same with Witherspoons on a lesser extent. The same with any kind of sports brand. It's advertisement. If you're just constantly told about it, you're going to think, oh, that must be the best thing. And it's the same with a political view. It's the same with the Ukraine flag. Just if you see it everywhere, you're going to think, oh, that's supposed to be there. That's the correct thing to do. Because you're constantly being bombarded with symbols.
It's like the European flag. Nobody saw that before the referendum. I don't ever remember seeing that anywhere. And then all of a sudden it was being waved in our faces from every single angle, wasn't it? As soon as they saw that that vote might have gone a different way, then they brought out this flag, which nobody would wave before and nobody held for. But let's go back to the position now. So what, with the trade unions taking this this motion and siding with imperialism, what is the future of trade unionism in Britain, Chris?
I'd say it's quite grim.
Yeah.
To try and put it in a few more words, like I said earlier, the unions have become a tool of the establishment. And we've also seen during the latest strikes that the unions are giving in quite easily to the so-called compromises of the bosses. And I would never call for a ban on trade unions, but I do think there needs to be a grassroots revolution within them. But that will not work until people are joining unions and then trying to overthrow them. And I myself have left Unite after hearing that they encouraged their teachers to scab in Scotland. And I'm not going to rejoin a union at the moment, but that does not make me think that trade unionism is pointless, because it's pretty much our only weapon, bar actual weapons, is the ability to withdraw our labour.
Okay, I think we can end it there. Fantastic. Great speaking to you both. And I hope everybody enjoyed our discussion. Stay tuned to the Class Consciousness Project. We'll be having more of these in the next coming few months. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky.
Bye, comrades.
Thank you.
Chris.
Take care and God bless now.